Hi, Melissa Bell, and welcome to the Business Roundup, where we talk to the movers and shakers in the business world. Today, joining me is Adam Ferrari. He is the CEO of Phoenix Energy Group. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Melissa.
So, we've talked before, but it's been a while, and this was before, President Trump took office, and that was at the start of the year. Are there some things that you're seeing lately in the industry, some changes that have been happening?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to note with President Trump getting in office, I think there's a renewed optimism. If you go back to the previous 4 years in that administration, there was a lot of very toxic rhetoric about the oil and gas industry. And I want to always take a moment to remind people, when you think about oil and gas in America, try not to think about big oil as this big negative thing. It's American men and women working high-paying jobs for a lot of smaller mom and pop oil companies too. That's the American story. It's not about some large state-run oil company. And so I think there's a renewed optimism because I think there's rational people in control now. President Trump has been very adamant about we need more of all energy, especially oil, gas, and even coal. And these are industries that are vital to American dominance. And, we have a president now that puts America first. And that's certainly something that we're really grateful for here at Phoenix Energy. And I think my peers in the industry would say the same thing.
And I know we're talking about energy and oil and gas, also like steel and, that type of thing. I think they're talking about iron, like different other industries are going to start kind of being like growing more in this country. Do you feel that that's going to be the case?
I do. Yeah, I think it's a loaded kind of, this is a topic that you could spend hours and days talking about. But I think if you've ever driven across the Midwest of the United States, I grew up in a town just outside of Chicago that had a big manufacturing base that had been whittled away over the last, over my lifetime. I'm 42 years old now, so I've seen it happen. And I think, this is the first time to have a Republican president that has like union support in the Midwest to bring jobs back to America. It's kind of a wild concept. If you would have told anyone that 20 years ago, they would have laughed at you. But I think it's going to happen. I think it's important. And I think last week you saw that we have a serious president and he's not going to let American workers be taken advantage of anymore. And so it's not even, it's so much deeper than just tariffs. It's about fair trade. And an American worker can't compete with a worker in China that doesn't have to follow the same regulations that a worker in America does. And so we need a level playing field so that we can have high quality blue collar jobs in America. I think we would all agree that's important. Not everyone's going to go work on Wall Street or become a lawyer. And frankly, there's too many lawyers in America anyway, and you can quote me on that. We need more people building things. And so I do think this president is serious. We all know that. And I don't know how anyone could say that's a bad thing to have men and women in America building stuff for Americans. We should all think that's a good thing because it is.
Keeping it, bringing it here and keeping it here so people can have jobs that are, something that I know before we were even talking about having careers, even in like the oil and gas industry. I mean, people make this their career. They do, pretty well, can make a decent life for themselves and their families. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And
Yep.
I know another thing was brought up was the importance behind locally developed oil investment and how it's powering growth in the energy independent sector. So how is that playing out?
Yeah. So in general, oil and gas is very capitally intensive. And what do I mean by that? It takes a lot of dollars to get a barrel of oil out of the ground or a cubic foot of natural gas. So capital formation is really important. At Phoenix Energy, we've taken a very innovative approach to capital formation that sort of goes around the traditional Wall Street model. And I think, we just had a call earlier today with some folks that are kind of connected to this administration as we're kind of trying to understand what the next 4 years might look like. And I think you're going to see a lot more versions of what we do here at Phoenix Energy in terms of a very favorable environment to raise capital, to deploy it into American energy resources, whether it's natural gas, whether it's LNG export, pipelines, oil development. And even President Trump recently signed an EO. I don't know exactly what it entailed, but the headline was pretty cute. It said, "Make coal great again." So you have a president that wants to have an abundance of all forms of American energy. I think that's really positive, and that's good for folks in my industry and even folks that are downstream from the oil production side of the industry.
And now how is, like, for instance, Phoenix Energy, how are they freeing owners' mineral values? I know that's another topic too
Yeah. Well, I think ultimately, how does a mineral owner get value for what's beneath the surface of their land? And there's really only two ways. They can sell it and monetize that asset and do whatever they choose with the cash that they get from the buyer, or they can lease it and have a company like Phoenix Energy drill it, and then they'll collect the royalties, whatever they negotiated on their lease. So that's something, our production is 100% domestic. When we grow energy supplies, we're growing it in America, and we're growing it in Montana, in North Dakota, Wyoming, Utah. And so we're very active in that. And yes, we are raising capital and deploying it directly to mineral owners in the United States.
And that's going to be important moving forward. Just the capital is going to be used for innovation, and in what ways too. I know AI, I've heard, is making its
Yeah,
way.
I think everyone, so there's a famous quote, and I like to remind folks, if you're not growing, you're slowly dying. And I think in oil and gas, it's no different. How are you growing? Are you just growing, doing what you've always done, or are you being a little more innovative? And I think the times we're in forces innovation. So we are big proponents of using technology to make things more efficient. At the end of the day, oil and gas is incredibly competitive. It's a commodity. We don't control the price of the barrel, but we control the cost to get the barrel out of the ground. And so we do invest in technology to be more efficient at how we get those barrels out of the ground every step of the way. There's hundreds of little steps from the idea to the produced barrel. And each one of those steps may have an application for whether it's AI type computing power or just other forms of innovation. And it's essential in our industry particularly, but a lot of other industries. I mean, if you just look at Uber transformed the traditional taxi industry. Some people would say for the better, some people would say for the worse, but I think most consumers would say it was a good thing. And we're doing the same thing in oil and gas, just on a little different scale.
And overall, how is investing in U.S. energy spurring? Well, we kind of talked about that, like economic muscle and power.
Sure. I think ultimately we are in an interesting time right now because there's a lot of uncertainty. We did talk about the tariffs and why that ultimately it's more than just tariffs. It's about fair trade. But oil prices have come off their highs, and the market was very volatile last week. And I think to ensure that we have robust investment in this sector, and let me step back a little bit. Investment in oil and gas is necessary. If we stop investing now, there will be a shortage of oil and natural gas in the world in 3 years. It's just not instant in oil and gas. It takes time, but we need a higher price environment to make sure that investment continues. And I will be very candid. $60 oil does not work for almost all American producers. You don't make enough money to survive in the long run. So in these markets, it's about preparing yourself for potentially a rough stretch and being strong enough that when prices recover, you'll be able to capitalize on that. At the end of the day, oil producers have to make money or they will stop producing oil. And so I think the investment environment is very positive. There's a lot of positive headwinds, and I mentioned that in the beginning. It feels like the last week was just a shock to the system. The world didn't change overnight. You just have a president that's standing up for America. And I think we would all agree that's a good thing. And I think we just need to give it a little bit more time to see how it plays out. But I'm still very optimistic. I do think the price point for crude oil needs to be closer to $70 for the American industry to be healthy and vibrant, which we all want. And I want to remind folks, tax dollars from oil production benefits every state and local community in such a big way. It's just so hard to quantify it. And like states like New Mexico, they wouldn't even exist without oil. The state of Texas, North Dakota, so many important industrial centers for oil and gas really depend on our industry. And it's important that the price reflects that so that we can have a healthy market in America.
And you were talking about job creation as well. Some of these places, they also, the blue collar type of the people that work there, they need this employment too, as well.
Absolutely.
And wages that, are able to sustain their families and them, and so that's important too.
Yes, critically. I say this, every drilling rig that's running in America benefits hundreds of hardworking Americans. And so that's sort of the proxy that we look at for how healthy the industry is. And right now, the rig count is stable, and we hope that it remains that way. But as I just alluded to, there's certainly been a little bit of bumpiness in the financial markets. And I think we all need to kind of take a deep breath and be patient and see how it plays out.
And now, Phoenix Energy, how long have you been around, your company?
Phoenix Energy's been around since 2019, so we're actually coming up on our 6-year anniversary. And I was just doing looking at some creative stuff that we're doing internally to celebrate as a team. But yes, we were founded in 2019, and most of the partners or the key folks at Phoenix have been in the industry for their entire professional career. I'm going on 20 years now. It's hard to believe. I'm 42. I got out of college, I think, yeah, I just turned 22. And so I've been in the business a long time, but Phoenix is around 6 years. And so we've been through, in that 6 year window, we had COVID, where we were told the world was ending. Thankfully, it didn't end, and we're still here. And now we're in this moment in time where there's a lot of economic uncertainty, perhaps with a new administration, but we always find a way to be optimistic about the future. And I think that's a trademark of being an American. We always look, I'd like to believe most of us look at it glass half full and not glass half empty.
Right. We look for ways to succeed no matter
Sure.
what the circumstances.
Yeah.
Definitely. And if people want more information on the company, what would be like the website? What would be the best place?
Yeah, our marketing team is awesome. They do things that I couldn't dream of doing. So if you look at our social feeds on YouTube, LinkedIn, you'll find a lot of cool stuff on Instagram and Facebook. We just opened a little office, a field office in North Dakota. We posted about that the other day. But if you go to our website, phoenixenergy.com, just spelled exactly how you would imagine, phoenixenergy.com. And you'll find a lot of exciting stuff about who we are, what we're doing. And we try to make it a little bit more fun on our website. Yes, we're a large company, but each one of our employees has a fun pick where, you get to see a different side of them. But yeah, that's where you can go find out a lot more about who we are and what we're doing. And we're excited about the future, and we're optimistic about the rest of this year and the rest of the Trump terms for sure.
Now, do you post news or any kind of updates on your
Yeah,
site? Okay.
all the time. Yeah, all the time we post exciting stuff. And, I think it's exciting. Some folks might not think it's as exciting, but it depends what your perspective is. But if you're interested in American oil and gas production and what an innovative company is up to in the space, and if you're looking for jobs, and we have job openings, we post them on our website as well. Yeah, take a look. And, if you have any feedback, I'm sure we have a contact us form. Let us know what we can do better. Most folks come to our site are our investors. We have thousands of investors in America, and they're always interested to kind of keep up to date with us and what we're doing. But if you're not an investor, you can still come check it out and give us any advice. Happy to take it.
That was one thing I thought about covering. Investment wise, do you see more people trying to invest in this industry than
We,
before?
yeah, we are right now. And what's interesting with us, we've had a product I'm not the securities salesman, so I can be a little more free with what I say. It's offered folks a stable, steady, fixed income over the years. It's a fixed rate corporate bond. That's the investment vehicle, and the rate has never changed. So I think a lot of folks, when the stock market gets a little wild and bumpy, they tend to look at our product as something that's a little more predictable. And so we have seen an increased interest in what we're doing, and our business is pretty simple. And I think that also helps people to understand it. I mean, to get a barrel of oil out of the ground is actually very complicated, but at a high level, we take capital in from investors and we invest that into the drilling of new oil and gas wells or purchasing of mineral rights that have production on them typically. So yeah, the business model is very straightforward. It's, we own assets that you can touch and feel and go stand on if you want. And so, yeah, we've had a renewed interest of late as the stock market's become a little bit bumpy, because I think when folks are thinking about investment options, AI sounds really cool. And, I'm sure it is very cool. And there's a lot of future uses for that technology, but it's also not as tangible. And I think there's a lot of folks that appreciate our industry because it's a core hard asset industry that it's easy to understand. And we like that. That's one thing that I've always enjoyed about oil and gas. At a very high level, it's very simple.
Right. It's definitely simple. It's going to be there, no matter what.
It's an essential. Yeah, you can't live without it.
So that's great. Well, I appreciate you being with us today and going over some of these things and some of the changes that we're seeing. And hopefully you'll come back again and we can talk about it. Hopefully things will start like really growing and more innovation and more jobs in the sector. So
I hope we're talking again in 6 months and everything is looking great. We're producing more barrels, hiring more people. Let's hope. I think we will be.
well, thanks for joining me